Hello everyone, welcome to my civil engineering YouTube channel. Please subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to get notified when I post my new videos. So today I'll be discussing the concept of friction. So in this lecture series I'll be dealing with definition of friction, important terminologies in friction and types of friction. Coming on to the first concept of this lecture series is definition of the friction. So here you can observe that the sketch here is representing the overall concept of the friction, wherein the object is resting on the surface, is subjected to the force which is pushing the object, so that there is a resultant motion trend along the direction of the force applied. So that is represented by the second sketch. So here the third sketch represents the microscopic view of the object along its surface, where there is lot of undulations which creates the non-uniformity in the surface. So whenever the force is applied on the object, as we notice that there is a motion trend. So when there is a motion trend, obviously the object starts to move along the direction of the force, but in turn, due to the non-uniformity of the contact surfaces, there will be resistance created for the direction of the motion opposite in the opposite direction. So that resistance which is created due to the non-uniformity of the surface along the direction opposite to the direction of the motion trend is called as frictional force. Frictional force is the force wherein it is the resistance offered on the body opposite to the direction of the motion is called as frictional force. So coming on to the next concept, that is terminologies, which are very important in the frictional concept. So first terminology is coefficient of friction. So here again I consider an object which is resting on the surface and subjected to the pushing force, wherein along the pushing force itself we can expect the motion trend. So the second sketch here, it represents the free body diagram. So wherein W represents the self weight of the object and F force is along the pushing nature, and the same direction you can expect the motion trend. So apart from that, as the definition of the friction is concerned, the frictional force will be always opposite to the direction of the motion trend. So therefore the F force, the frictional force, is along the left side direction. So apart from that, the contact surface offers the reaction perpendicular to the direction of the object, which is called as normal reaction. So normal reaction, it is the reaction or the force which is created perpendicular to the direction of the contact surface. So always coefficient of friction is defined as the ratio of frictional force to that of the normal reaction is called as coefficient of friction. So coefficient of friction is defined as the ratio of frictional force to the normal reaction. So it is a constant, so and is represented by mu. So mu is equal to F by N, where F is the frictional force, N is the normal reaction, W is the self weight, and mu is the coefficient of friction. So coming on to the next important terminology here is angle of friction. So I once again consider the object which is resting on the surface and subjected to the force of pulling in nature, wherein we can expect the motion trend in the same direction. So this second sketch is represented as a free body diagram, wherein W is the self weight and N is the normal reaction and F is the frictional force opposite to the direction of the motion trend. So as we know that F and N are in the perpendicular directions, so we can obtain their resultant. So always the resultant will be along this direction if both are inwards, both are in the inward direction. So you can also notice that there is an angle created over here. So the angle of friction is therefore defined as the angle between the resultant. So the angle between the resultant and the normal reaction is called as angle of friction. So angle between the resultant. So this resultant which is formed due to the frictional force and the normal reaction, and then the normal reaction is called as, angle of friction. So you can just notice that if you just project these lines, so it forms a polygon. So wherein theta will be the trigonometric tan theta function, so which is equal to F by N, that is frictional force by N. So therefore tan theta will be equal to F by N, wherein theta is the angle of friction. So we also know from the previous slide that mu is equal to F by N, wherein mu is the angle of friction, mu is the coefficient of friction. So therefore we can straight away tell it as tan theta is equal to mu, or coefficient of friction is equal to tan trigonometric function of angle of friction. So angle of friction is the angle between the resultant and the normal reaction. So coming on to the next very important terminology, here is the angle of repose. So here I am just considering an object which is resting on the inclined surface. So here I have not here I have not put any external force here. So due to the application of the self weight itself and due to the gravity, the body is tending to take the motion trend in the downward direction. So therefore if I just draw the free body diagram over here, so this dotted line of the red color represents the x and y axis, which is actual x and y axis of the object. So W is a self weight which is making an angle phi, which is nothing but the same as that of the angle of inclination over here. So as we know that the motion trend is in the downward direction, so the frictional force will be in the opposite direction. Therefore it is following this path, and n is the normal reaction. So therefore angle of repose is nothing but the maximum angle made by the inclined plane with horizontal when the body is placed on the plane which is at the point just verge of sliding. So whenever when the body is placed on the inclined surface, so it is the angle at which the body starts to slide through the inclined surface. So that point where the body starts to slide, that angle is called as angle of repose. So the body, it is a point wherein it is an angle for the point wherein the body is just at the verge of sliding is called as angle of repose. So coming on to next important concept, that is types of friction. So the types of friction means basically the frictional force are classified based on three varieties, that is based on state of rest or state of motion, and second one is based on motion between the contact surfaces, and third one is based on the type of contact surface. So coming on to the first one, it is based on the state of rest or state of motion. It is called as static friction. So whenever this is a type of friction wherein it is experienced when the contact surfaces of the body are at rest. So static friction is a type of friction which is experienced when the contact surfaces of the body are at rest. So next is the dynamic friction. So dynamic friction, it is the type of friction which is experienced by the body when one body moves over the other. So Dynamic friction, it is a type of friction which is experienced by the body when one body moves on the other. So next one is classification of the friction based on the motion between the contact surfaces. So this can be further stated as it is the type of dynamic friction. So or the classification of dynamic friction. Based on this, there are two types. First one is sliding friction. So it is the type of friction wherein which is experienced by the contact surfaces when one body slides over the other. So I repeat it. Sliding friction is the resisting force experienced by the contact surfaces when the body slides on one another. So next is rolling friction. So it is the resisting force experienced by the contact surfaces when the body rolls over one another. So this is the typical concept of sliding and rolling friction. So coming on to the next important classification, which is based on the type of contact surface. There are two types. First one is called as dry friction. So it is the type of frictional force or resisting force experienced by the contact surface due to the non-lubricated nature of the contact surfaces. When the contact surfaces are dry in nature, so then the resisting force offered due to that non-frictional or due to the non-lubricated nature of that surface, so that type of friction is called as dry friction. So next is fluid friction. So it is a type of frictional force which is experienced due to the presence of lubricating fluid between the contact surfaces. So it is a type of frictional force experienced due to the presence of lubricating fluid between the contact surfaces. So this type of friction is called as fluid friction. So this is all about the definition of friction, important terminologies used in the concept of friction, as well as classification of the friction. So based on the contact surface, based on the motion between the contact surface, and also based on the state of rest and state of motion. So this is how we are going to state the concept of frictional. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe the video. Thank you.